Welcome and salutations to this episode of Masterpieces of Literature. As always, I am your dear host, Professor Doctor Dane T. Jarlsworth. You might recognize me from other Artur-based projects such as How It's Always Aliens, where I prove that every coincidence in your life, as well as all historical events, were the result of ancient aliens. Or Prawn Stars, where I try to unsuccessfully unload several bags of rotten shrimp at local pawn shops for petty cash. Oh, you should definitely check that one out. I'm quite the scallywag in it. But today, as always, on Masterpieces of Literature, I'm going to discuss a tour de force in the classic literature genre, the sort of story that comes along only once in a generation and defines that generation forever after. That's right, today we dive into one of the greatest tomes ever written, Far Country, by Peter L. Rice. The story begins in the year 2510 in Draconis Combine space. This is before the giant hulking mechanical war machines known as BattleTechs became common in this universe, and so instead we find ourselves accompanying an infantry division as they shuffle from one world to another. Now, oh, infantry, like infants. Oh, so very Freudian of this master author. I realize that this all sounds rather pedestrian and ho-hum, but allow me to read a throwaway line from the Kurita commander in charge of this infantry division as he spies a random passenger joining his caravan. When Hamata noticed that the driver was a woman, his jaw tightened involuntarily. He understood that females of the Draconis Combine were not barred from any profession. He understood that the Combine needed every human resource at its disposal. But that didn't alter the fact that he preferred to have only men in his unit. By careful manipulation of the personnel records, he had managed to keep his fighting units almost pure. It was true that the support and administrative units included more women, but that couldn't be helped. Here we are introduced to the palpable concept of warrior as a man, and war as masculine. Seeing these stone-aged concepts popped up in this very futuristic novel is rather disorientating, but it sets the chauvinistic tone for much of the story. Meanwhile, in the BattleTech present of 3056, a little more than 500 years since the first jump ship accident, we have another accident occur. This time, the jump ship is carrying a mixed force of BattleTech mercenaries, an elite infantry force known as DEST, or DEST, and a civilian crew of a dropship. Upon landing on an apparently abandoned world, the factions inevitably start squabbling over who should command. Early on, the mercenary captain voices his initial and greatest concern. I will once more read from you from this lovely book. "What about the women?" voiced the mercenary commander asked. "I didn't know we had to do anything about the women," Takuda, the leader of the elite infantry force, or DEST, answered. "We're here forever, and forever is something you will have to understand. If we're going to survive at all, we will have to deal out the women to the best men, which should be done immediately," said Vost, the mercenary, again. Takuda then asks about the women's thoughts on this, to which Vost answers, "The women will do as they are told, of course." All right, it's great reading. In a deft move by our author, he allows us to organically discover that women are still little better than chattel, whether that be 500 years in the future or just him letting us know his own opinions remain unchanged. Meanwhile, a sort of Cold War begins between the two groups of survivors. The Dest soldiers control access to the crashed dropship, which holds the mercenaries' battle mechs. So long as the mercenaries cannot get to their battle mechs, they are forced to submit to the well-armed Dest commandos. But if the mercenaries get to their mechs, they would be unstoppable. This is the sort of dramatic storytelling that would put Homer to shame. As these intense and realistic politics play out, the survivors explore their surroundings and discover, much to their surprise, giant alien birds that speak English. This is truly a mystifying book. Upon meeting this giant bird, its first English words are like a poetic sledgehammer. Please, please not shoot, do. I, your friend, want to be. A phrase unparalleled in English literature, an exaltation of true genius, the sort of transcendent wordplay that makes even Shakespeare seem crude, while driving most grown men to tears the first time they read it. It also does an amazing job of getting across the alienness of these bird creatures. The careful way the word order has been dissected and subtly altered truly demonstrates Peter L. Rice's mastery over language. It's an emotional moment in the book. Not to forget the salient theme of this book, the first thought the human discoverer has after meeting this English-speaking giant bird creature is this. Knight wondered if the two species would be able to interbreed. That is the first real thought humanity has when meeting a giant, green, English-speaking alien bird. The first sentient alien life ever discovered in their universe. This is truly a masterstroke on the author's part. Here you see he has cut away all the trappings of civilization, the useless frills of a superlative society built upon saving face and denying the harsh nature of reality and ourselves. Here he asks the only question mankind has ever asked since they first stalked the ancient savannas of Africa 100,000 years ago. Can I it? For brevity's sake, I will condense much of the story. The mercenaries escape with many of their battle mechs, a panther, javelin, and phoenix hawk. However, their two locusts are left behind, as the only female mercenary pilot decided against following the man who wanted to pass out women like candy. The survivors then discover the 500-year-old civilization built by the earlier stranded jump ship. This civilization has broken into 3 warring cities: a mercantile city that is led by the wealthy for the wealthy, a religious city ran by a strict Shinto-inspired cult, and a martial city ran by the masculine army. Women are shown to be heavily devalued in this culture, regardless of what city you reside in, as you can see for yourself in this quote. In my world, said Saruki, with a slight raising of the lip, we do not find men who are willing to follow the commands of a female. The plot loses most of its cohesion past this point. The mercenaries attempt to start a bidding war between the 3 cities. The Dest Commandos, locusts, try to prevent this from happening, but ultimately fail due to being locusts, and are forced to flee, along with their new bird creature allies, to a distant part of the world. The mercenaries also start bickering amongst themselves, with the Phoenix Hawk pilot forgetting to refill his gas, and while in flight mode crashing into a forest and dying. The Dest survivors and their bird creature friends hope to discover another human civilization on this world, as there are rumors of a dropship that crash-landed far away from all the others. They follow this prophecy to a distant land and do indeed discover a dropship. But there is no civilization, and they instead find an ancient recording waiting for them. We have survived for 1 year at this location. It has become obvious that we will die here, for we have no way to reproduce. There were a dozen women aboard this ship when we made the jump, but the breach in the pressure hull took the lives of all of them. Thus, we are a society of 25 men. Rather than die old and useless, we have decided that seppuku is the honorable way to depart this life. Very heavy stuff. The Dest commandos clear out the dropship, fix it up a little, and despite being from a heavily Shinto-Japanese culture, absurdly name it Noah's Ark, and blast off to a nearby moon to start a new civilization, leaving behind their one remaining and utterly ruined locust to be worshipped by the bird people as a god for all time. Thrilling. I would like to hazard against interpreting most or perhaps any of this at face value. The actions of so many in this novel defy any sort of logical human-based rationale, which leaves us with two interpretive choices. Either we agree that the author was a misguided social pervert who constantly refocused on dehumanized women throughout the story without even the merest understanding of what actual human beings would do in these circumstances, or we understand, in my opinion, rightfully, that this story was an allegory, a story about the masculine, obsessed warriors of a decadent, ruined society that being the inner sphere, taking their vapid philosophy and phallic worship to a new, far country, where they symbolically and literally rape the world and force the native inhabitants into the same enslavement and servility that they have bound women and their own feminine natures. Despite the slightly better ideals of the high-minded Dest commandos, they proved incapable of undoing the rape of this planet and instead only served to propagate the same defective ideals on a new planet via their Noah's Ark. Like a white globular seed of man sprayed out into the cosmic night to give birth once more to war, ruin, and regressive masculinity. Finally, we see a glimpse of where such behaviors lead. For the pure dropship, the one without women at all, implausibly lost their will to live. They took the final regressive step to self-destruction, falling upon their phallic swords and ending the cycles of masculine ruin in this metaphorical circle jerk. This is obviously what this book is about, and why it has stood the test of time so well. Because if this wasn't what this book was about, well, whoever wrote it would be insane, because it is that bad. Thank you for joining me, Professor Doctor Dane T. Jarlsworth, for this exciting episode of Masterpieces of Literature.
I thought you liked a little pain with your women,
Elizabeth Hoon said.
or is it you just like women?
You knew the deal when you came with us. You have no rank better than either Fiona or Michelle. And if Tammy Wilson wants some action, she's welcome to it as well. You knew that coming in. Juggling 3 women and perhaps a 4th, was harder than I thought it would be.